Come forward, boy. This is where you saw them last.
Yes, just 2 days ago.
We'll start praying they're still here, Shepherd, if you want to be paid the bounty.
Find David of Bethlehem.
Bring me his head.
All!
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Behavior Revolution Scriptures. Really exciting going through the story of David in this kind of detail because, he's the man after Yahusha's own heart. We learn a lot about what pleases Yahusha, the attitudes, the behavior, and also the communication when he's talking to Yahusha in prayer. We're going to go into a lot of that today. We're going to talk about some Psalms and look at some Psalms because they're coming up in David's life. So let's get straight into it. What happened in our last episode? We just saw David flee from Gibeah. Remember that? He's come to Nob. And we talked about all the priesthood and everything and the bread that he came and the sword that he came and got. We just saw David flee from Gibeah, Saul's headquarters, to Nob, where the most legitimate priesthood resided. At least the northern tribes thought so. Then when David acquired the food and weapon he needed, he bolted off to Gath. Why he thought he'd be accepted and even safer in the province of the Philistines is bizarre, especially after killing their champion Goliath. But, shock horror, he is immediately taken prisoner upon his arrival, and while there, before his fake spaz act to get himself free, he wrote about his experience in a psalm. So while David was locked up in the prison at Gath, before he'd put on the whole frothing at the mouth and drilling in his beard and everything. Before he did all that, he was in a prison. And he wrote a psalm. So I find these psalms, I've been spending a bit of time in these psalms this week, and I'm really loving them. Because to me, as an old religious ex-worship leader, psalms were just something that you went to when you couldn't find any songs to use or song lyrics, or I'll just go to the book of Psalms. There's stuff there, just find a word and repeat it, find a phrase and keep repeating it over and over again, get everybody in a frenzy. It was just a source of song lyrics. Psalms, weren't really thinking about what was going on, the story, the context, and of course the author, David. So going through all this with David, you really appreciate and you can associate as well. Let's go into it. This is Psalm 56, and Dave wrote this while he's in the prison at Gath. O Yahuwah, be in my corner, and please help me. Everyone wants to get me and stomp on my head. My enemies attack all day, and I'm constantly hounded by those who lie about me. And many are loud and bold in their attacks. But when I'm afraid, I'll praise you, because you always make good on every word you've promised. I trust in you, so why should I be afraid? What can mere mortals do to me anyway? They're always twisting what I say, leading a smear campaign against me, spending their days plotting my collapse. They gang up, skulking together to spy on me, watching my every step so carefully, eager to see what I'll do next so they can attack. Don't let them get away with their wickedness, Father. Be enraged and rip their evil to shreds. For only you know my real heart, every anguish, every turmoil and sleepless night, tossing and turning. You've kept track of all my sorrows in your notebook. You've even collected all my tears in a bottle and recorded each one in a spreadsheet. Selah. In the book of Psalms, Selah means a musical instruction. Something's going to happen in the song. So it's a note to the musical orchestrator or the conductor. That's what Salah means. Let's have a break. Something else is going to happen in the song. So in this case, a challenger enters the ring. You coming at me? You'll be bolting, screaming with your tail between your legs, man, when I call Yahuwah for help, because this I know. Yahuwah is in my corner, and I praise him for what he's promised me. Yes, me, the scum of the earth. I trust in Yahuwah, and I'm so bloody proud of it. Why should I be afraid? Who are you, thinking you have the right to attack me, his son? Don't you pack of peasants know I'm royalty? Chosen and anointed? What? You challenge the almighty living Elohim? How bourgeois. What can you mere mortals do to me? Watch this space, bitches, because I'm on the up and up, riding the coattail of my master Yahuwah. For I will thank him all the days of my life, and try my utmost and my best to behave as he wants, because he's rescued me from the depths of death and slavery, and kept my feet from slipping while I clawed my way out of the sludge by my fingernails. So now I can walk in your presence, my Father Yahuwah. Yes, in the magnificent, life-giving light of your eternal presence. Selah. Mic drop. That's what Dave has to say about it. So, I mean, I never thought much about these psalms. I never thought I'd ever be able to associate. But when I look back over 10, 20, 30 years of experiences, Dave's going through the same thing we're all going through, have been through. Things that have been said about us, things that we've done, all the journey that we've been on. Dave's going through this. And look how he cries out to Yahusha about it. He's honest about it. There's a pattern of communication here. When David's in the midst of trouble and danger, like Psalm 56 here, he cries out to Yahuwah, pleading his case, and asks for him to deliver him. Often David is very specific about what he wants to occur. Further, he expresses absolute trust in Yahuwah. He acknowledges Yahuwah's divine ability to rescue him and intersperses praise for Yahusha throughout what he's saying. It is so important that we remember that David always leaves room for Yahusha. David always leaves room for Yahuwah's way to happen. Yahuwah's way to happen. Yahuwah might choose not to deliver. Yahuwah might decide to deliver in a manner or a time frame entirely different than David hopes for or envisions. But David hopes that by being obedient to Yahuwah prior to these hard times, that Yahuwah will see David's righteousness and take that into account. Interesting. David hopes that by being obedient to Yahuwah prior to these hard times, by having a strong relationship with Yahuwah, having his favor, that Yahuwah is more inclined to deliver him and fight for him and go ahead of him when the time is needed. So I just wanted to share that psalm with you because it's right smack bang in the middle of the story that we're talking about with David. And I'm really enjoying the psalms, like I said. In fact, after we've dealt with the story of David and maybe Solomon and all that, we might go straight into psalms while it's still fresh in our minds who wrote them, because it's great. It's a lot like poetry. You can put a modern twist on it and get the essence, the context and the heart out of it, and it relates. What about how relatable it is? David's going through the same thing we're all going through. So where are we up to in the story of David? Now that the door of escape, he's just run away from Gath. King thought he was mad. Get him out of here. I've got enough crazy people here. So now that the door of escape to the west, to Philistia, has been closed on David, he journeys back to Judah, if only briefly. So after faking madness to King Achish, David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. Soon all his relatives and family joined him there, for fear of King Saul, and others began arriving too, men in distress and trouble, or in debt, or who were just bitter with life. And before he knew it, David was the captain of around 400 men who hadn't actually come to form an army or officially revolt against Saul. Their lives had just been ruined by Saul's hatred government policies against David. Saul now ran his kingdom the same way that the other petty kings around the Middle East ran theirs. All that mattered was his own power, his own wealth, and that his tribal dynasty would be established and protected. The instructions of Moses that were to be Israel's constitution for the benefit of the people was set aside by Saul, and the people were suffering. So all these people have just come out to speak to David, to be around David, because Saul's making their life a living hell because of his jealousies and hatred against David. The people who came to David were ┕ that's Hebrew for men in a hard-pressed situation. These were the people that came to David, ┕ men in a hard-pressed situation and under a dictating oppressor. These people were ┬Ā, bitter and poor in spirit. This same term was used of the childless Hannah, who eventually bore Samuel. Remember how upset and devastated and weeping and grieving in her being she was. That's what these people were like that came out to David. Picture the poor and oppressed commoners, even of Yahusha's day, living under the pagan conditions imposed by the Roman Empire, and coming in droves to this hippie teacher from Nazareth to hear words of comfort and perhaps even find a way out. These also were the ┬Ā, bitter and poor in spirit of that era, just as these people with David were. See a similarity, another pattern? It's the same behavior, it's the same oppression, it's the same feeling, it's the same thing possibly we've all been through. We don't have to go through it now with the understanding that we have. We don't have to be bitter and poor in spirit. We understand the system we work in and that we are in. We might have to be slaves to work our certain lifestyle or have what we want in life, just to run a house or run a business, whatever, but we don't have to be slaves within ourselves, you know. Anyway, here in this setting of hiding out in a cave, David wrote another psalm. And for the sake of connecting the scriptures, let's read it. So we read Psalm 56 up the top. Now we're going to read Psalm 57, because this one Dave wrote while he was hiding out in this cave and people are starting to come out to him. His friends and family and people that were grieving and poor and bitter in spirit. "O Yahuwah, please help me, for people are hounding me all day long. I look to you for protection, hiding under the shadow of your wings until the dangerous storms pass by. I cry out to Yahuwah Almighty, the only one who keeps me sane and together, perfecting his purposes in me. You send help from your realm to rescue me, disgracing and humiliating everyone who kicks and tries to swallow me up. Selah." Yes, Yahuwah will send forth his unfailing kindness and truth, always making good on every promise. For I'm surrounded by fierce lions with an insatiable, greedy appetite to devour flesh, with teeth like arrows, tongues sharp like daggers, and words like armor-piercing bullets. Rise up, O Yahuwah, high into the sky, and let the whole earth see your esteem. My pathetic enemies hide in ambush. Just look, there's booby traps everywhere I step. I'm so tired, Father, exhausted just from my own bloody stress. They've dug a deep pit and hidden the trapdoor along my path, but because of you, Yahuwah, they've tripped and now fallen into their own snare. Yeah. Selah. But my heart is confident in you, Yahuwah. It leaps for joy in my chest. No wonder I wake up humming and buzzing a tune under my breath. I can finally sing your praises now. So wake up, hands, wake up, feet. Get the band back together and tell them to sober up. Polish and tune your instruments. We've got the gig of a lifetime to welcome the dawn with fine music and song. So no matter what, I will thank you, Yahuwah. My insides explode with joy no matter who's around. I will sing your praises among the nations, for your unfailing love is as high as the sky, and your steadfastness reaches to the clouds. So be exalted, O Yahuwah, above the whole universe, and may your esteem shine over all the earth. Here again is the pattern of crying out to Yahusha and at the same time praising him. Notice that? This is what I like, I've come to love about David's writing, is that one minute he's crying out and he's deep and depressed and stressed, and the next minute he's just throwing his hands up, screaming and praising Yahusha and dancing and singing, and the next minute he's coming at his enemies. Yeah, come on, I got Yahusha, come on. You know, like he's having this whole array of colourful emotions in the same text. It's really encouraging. He's a human being. It's real. This is the pattern of crying out to Yahusha again and at the same time praising him. There is less fear and anxiety in this psalm though than the last one, and even though his enemies are lurking about, Yahusha has helped him to avoid their snare. He has a peace and calm covering him like a garment, despite a very uncertain future. He feels Yahuwah's presence and senses his guidance in his life and is comforted by it. Comforted by it. What does the latter text say? I will set, don't go out. So Yahusha says to his disciples, don't go out and do anything yet. I will send you the comforter. Yeah. So all these people have come out to see David, and he's formed a bit of an army. Later, David went to Mizpah in Moab, where he asked the king, is it okay if my dad and mum live here with you until I know what Elohim is going to do for me? And the king, this is in Moab, and the king gave them sanctuary, remembering Ruth, David's great-grandmother, who was also from Moab. Remember in our stories of Ruth? Ruth came from Moab. Ruth is David's great-great-grandmother, so there's an association there. Life is a bit uncertain for David. His parents are getting old, so he goes to the king of Moab and says, can you look after my parents here? Can they have sanctuary here? And David's parents stayed in Moab with the king during the entire time David was living in his stronghold. And some time had passed. After some time had passed, Sam sent the prophet Gad, probably from his school in Naoth, to advise David. It was common for a prophet to attach themselves to a king for counsel, and David was the new king as far as Sam and Yahuwah were concerned, so they sent him a prophet to be with him. And Gad told David, leave this stronghold and return to the land of Judah. And Gad stayed loyal to Dave, helping him hear the will and voice of Yahuwah, even after he became the nation's recognized king.
Everyone dies. These priests have harbored David the traitor, and they too are traitors. Kill them all. Why?
Kill them! They are not gods! They are men! Kill them! Quick! No!
So David went to the forest of Hereth, but news of his arrival in Judah soon reached King Saul. At the time, the king was sitting beneath the tamarisk tree on the hill at Gibeah, holding his spear and surrounded by his soldiers, officers. He was seldom seen without a spear these days, for it had become his scepter and the symbol of his personal authority and character. Interesting. Didn't go anywhere without his spear in his hand. Probably wanted to use it. "Listen here, you men of Benjamin," Saul shouted to his officers when he heard the news. "Has that son of Jesse promised every one of you fields and vineyards? Has he made you all generals and captains in his army, leading hundreds and thousands? Is that why you've all stabbed me in the bloody back and conspired against me? Not one of you vipers told me when my own son John made a covenant with the son of Jesse. And you're not even sorry for me. Think of it, my own son encouraging him to kill me, and he's still trying to today." Then Doug the Edomite, who was standing there with Saul's men, spoke up. "When I was at Nob, I saw the son of Jesse talking to the high priest, Ahimelech, son of Ahitub. And Ahimelech spoke to Yahuwah for him, before giving Dave food and the sword of Goliath the Philistine." So King Saul immediately sent for Ahimelech and all his family who served as priests at Nob. And when they arrived, Saul shouted at him, "Listen to me, you son of Ahitub." "Yes, my king," Ahimelech asked. "Why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me?" Saul demanded. He wouldn't even say David's name out loud. "Why'd you give him food and a sword? Why have you consulted with Elohim for him? Why have you encouraged him to kill me, as he's trying to do this very day? Why? Master, is anyone among all your servants as trustworthy as David, your son-in-law? He's the captain of your bodyguards and a highly honoured member of your household. This was certainly not the first time I'd spoken to Elohim for him. Please, my king, don't blame me and my family in this matter. We had no idea of any plot against you." "Enough! You and your entire family will die." And Saul ordered his bodyguards, "Kill these priests of Yahuwah, for they're all allies and conspirators with David. They knew he was running away from me and didn't even tell me." But Saul's men refused to kill Yahuwah's priests. And even though Saul, the 𝗪𝗪 queen, has just ordered the elimination of the whole priesthood, not because they violated the Torah, or were lazy in their duties, or had offended Yahuwah, but because they had shown compassion to someone that Saul, in his paranoia and hatred, deemed an enemy. His men were shocked and refused their king's order, because they were not about to harm Yahuwah's set-apart priesthood and set themselves at war with the Creator. Even though to deny this homicidal king could have meant death for any one of them, enough of the fear of Yahuwah still remained in them, that death at Saul's hand was preferable to the far-reaching wrath of Yahuwah upon their heads. Of course, the pagan foreigner Doug held no such awe or fear of Yahuwah, and Saul knew full well, which is why he was employed by him. So, the king said to Doug, "You go and bloody do it. Strike 'em all down, Dugsy." So Doug the Edomite turned on the priesthood and slaughtered everyone that day. Everyone. 85 priests in all, still wearing their priestly garments. Then he went to Nob, the town of the priests, and killed the priests' families, all the men, women, children, and babies, and all the cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats too. What about this? Saul's just annihilated, made extinct the priesthood. Only Abiathar, one of Ahimelech's sons, escaped and fled to David. And when he told him that Saul had killed the priests of Yahuwah, David cried out, knowing that his own lies and deceptions had led to the murders at Nob. "I knew it. When I saw Doug the Edomite there that day, I knew he was going to tell Saul, 'Now I've caused the death of all your father's family.' Stay here with me, boy, and don't be afraid. I promise I'll look after you and protect you with my own life. For the same savage maniac wants to kill us both now. David openly admits his fault and pledges to guard and care for the only surviving priest from Nob, Abiathar. Not only that, but David now had in his charge the sole remaining link to Yahuwah, the priest. So with that, along with the ephod that carried the precious Urim and Thummim stones, David now had a means to discern Yahuwah's will. Saul certainly had no use for tabernacle relics. So that's an interesting side note too. All the priesthood's been killed, so any relics, anything that's still going on in the tabernacle at Nob, David could now have, was in control of. Saul didn't want any of it. He was controlling his own, having everything his own way. So what a bloodbath. What a devastation. Saul's just annihilated the whole priesthood. And we know what painstaking detail Yahusha set out, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, for the priesthood to live by and how to orchestrate it all. But don't forget this. Don't forget Samuel's first prophecy from Yahuwah. Remember, we're putting puzzle pieces together here. All the little patterns join up. Nothing Yahusha says, gets forgotten about. Everything he says happens. Don't forget Samuel's first prophecy from Yahuwah. Remember when he was only a boy? He kept waking up. He didn't know Yahusha's voice yet. Eli's priestly dynasty was now over, as Yahuwah told Sam when he was still a boy. Remember that? Eli and his ratbag disobedient sons? Eli fell over on the chair and snapped his neck when the ark had been stolen, and his sons were killed in battle. Ichabod, Yahusha's buggered off. He's gone. The presence is gone. The esteem's gone. Well, that happened then, but another part of the prophecy was that your line of priests, your dynasty, is over. This terrible bloodbath not only punished what was actually an illegitimate line of priests, Eli's, but by wiping them out, it now paved the way for the much smaller and lesser powerful line of Zadok from Aaron's firstborn son to ascend back to their rightful legitimate place. And in later chapters, we'll see David appoint Zadok as the high priest to complete the circle. Everything Yahuwah says always happens. So we'll just to refresh your memory on the chart, remember Aaron's firstborn son, that was where the priests were supposed to come from. The high priest was to be from the eldest firstborn son. So these two died. So this is the line. Somewhere along the way, Eli's family got the priesthood. Some shifty mobster deals went on, and now Eli was going on. And same here, Ahimelech. This was the guy that helped David eat the showbread. He gave him the showbread in our last episode. This is Ahimelech. And now Doug the Edomites dobbed on him, and Ahimelech and all his family have been killed, as well as all the priests. All the priests have been killed, except his son, Abiathar. But he's only a boy. And now this will give way for Zadok, to be the high priest. That's what we're talking about. There's two lines. Priest wars, feuding high priests. So don't forget about that pattern either. And don't forget about this pattern. There's another pattern again. We'll see the same thing that happened here at the massacre of the priests of Nob repeated 1,000 years later, when a foreigner sets out to kill the Yahuwah anointed and legitimate king of Yisrael that was divinely scheduled to replace an illegitimate king of Yisrael. Who was it? Who was it? When the paranoid King Herod hears that Yahuwah's anointed king, the Messiah, has been born, he treats him as an unwelcome rival. Even more interesting is that both Doug and Herod were Edomites. Doug the Edomite, and Herod was an Edomite too. Although the latter text calls Herod an Idumean, that is merely the Greek word for Edomite, just as the Palestinian is Greek for Philistine. The anti-king, this is interesting, the anti-king had a pagan henchman. Saul had a pagan henchman, an outsider from the nations in Doug. The anti-king had a pagan henchman who was masquerading as a friend of Yahuwah at Nob. His primary job was to thwart any attempt by Yahuwah to remove his boss's authority and turn it over to the Anointed One. And one of the best ways to do that was to kill all the Anointed One's friends and followers in the process of killing the Anointed One. So, Saul's crafty, isn't he? While on the surface, this is all about King Saul committing personal retribution against Ahimelech, who Saul felt was siding with David. That was just a ruse, just an excuse. Saul was looking for an excuse to abolish the priesthood. The whole time Saul's been looking and wanting an excuse to abolish the priesthood. After all, what possible use could a man who was Yahusha's enemy have for a group of men whose sole purpose is to discern Yahuwah's will, teach it to Saul's people, and carry out Yahuwah's divine laws? See, what were these people? It has been the ways of men since time immemorial to create false crises or come up with an excuse to carry out some kind of act that actually disguises a much broader and more sinister design and intent. If King Saul was going to defeat Yahuwah, he would have to begin by eradicating his servants first. Interesting. That's the scripture today. And a lot of these commentaries and things that came up about this text here was talking about the word irrational. Saul was controlled by the irrational dark side. What does irrational mean? We hear that word all the time. It's irrational. Well, Saul is the epitome of irrational. Yeah? Herod was the epitome of irrational. Satan is the biggest epitome model of what irrational is. Let's look at this word irrational because it is demonstrated in actual physical people, but it's also a spirit and it's a behavior. What does irrational mean? In English, irrational is cognitive thinking, brain activity. Irrational is brain thinking, talking, or acting without rationality. It is more specifically described as an action or opinion given through inadequate use of reason or through emotional distress or cognitive deficiency. You're stupid. If you describe someone's feelings and behavior as irrational, you mean they are not based on logical reasons or clear thinking. Other words you can use for irrational are illogical, crazy, silly, absurd, or what I'm going to call it today, a lie. Irrational in the Hebrew is a brute, unreasonable, and hostile. And this is what we see in the shadow of Saul here. King Saul was not merely a poor choice for king, nor does he represent a failed king. He is the anti-king. Everything that humans desire in a king and that Yahusha hates in a government leader. That's what Saul was. I used to relate to King Saul when he was getting tormented and pestered and thinking he was right, but he wasn't right, this, that. That's what I was going through at the time. Now I don't relate to him at all. I'm being affected by what David's going through. Crying out to Yahusha and finding his strength in Yahusha and the ups and downs and everything, that communication that David's having with Yahusha. Saul is just completely unrepentant, will not see anything, will not go Yahusha's way, will not. So he's the anti-king. Everything that society wants and Yahusha hates. King Saul is real. King Saul was real. And what we read about him is true. And it actually happened. But he is also a behavioral type, a shadow. And he established a pattern for the great anti-Messiah that we see all around us today, and who may even appear as a person. Maybe. Depending on your eschatological views.
You freed the city. You even picked up half a dozen soldiers. But we must hurry before Saul's army tracks us down or the Philistines return.
We're gonna stay.
These people have requested his protection. They've asked him to stay and they want to honor him.
Yoav, you recommend this course of action?
We can make a base here. The walls will protect us.
These walls can't hold back an entire army.
We're tired of running.
Saul will come eventually, but when he does, Michal and I will persuade him that I have no intention to take his throne by force or any other means.
Last I recall, he was throwing a spear in your direction.
I just have to beg his forgiveness.
If I can forgive, then so can my father.
You underestimate his rage. Did he not hang Hanok of Reuben and his entire family?
I'm not a traitor, Yari. A man of failing, yes, but I am not a traitor. I've spent many hours with the king, and I know in his heart he's a rational man. So I just have to make him see reason.
King Saul was among the most beautiful of men, we're told. He was a head and shoulders taller than any other man of his tribe, perhaps in all of Israel. Handsome, strong and charismatic, with a natural talent for knowing how to manipulate and control. He quickly abandoned the ways of his creator for the ways of the human evil inclination and the spiritual dark side. So, the rhetorical question is a timeless one. Just like Saul, how is it that Satan honestly believes he can defeat Yahusha? Ever thought of that? How is it that Satan honestly believes he can defeat Yahusha? At one time, Satan lived in the high dimension in close proximity to Yahuwah himself, and as the most beautiful and intelligent of all interdimensional creatures. How could he rebel against his master and creator and honestly believe he could win? How could Satan not understand to his core that because of his choice to try and place himself on Yahuwah's throne, that the only possible ending for him was eternal destruction? How could he not think that? Well, we see that same scenario being played out in 1 Samuel as King Saul is fully aware that Yahuwah has not only removed the throne of Israel from him, but has also completely and permanently abandoned him. King Saul is now Yahuwah's enemy. Did Saul honestly believe that he could defeat Yahuwah's will and hang on to his earthly throne? Did Saul seriously think that he could kill Yahuwah's anointed one, David, in order to keep David from assuming his Yahuwah-established destiny as king of Yahuwah's own kingdom? The problem with Satan, and the problem with Saul, and the problem with all leaders of government who think they can override Yahuwah's justice and truth and morality with their own, the problem is a deep-seated spiritual irrationality, craziness. For the world, and especially for the elitist intelligentsia, these human leaders seem to be nearly infallible and undefeatable, men to be followed without question, if not outright worshipped. So, for us as the bride to think of Satan as irrational is hard to do when we see what he has accomplished over the last 6,000 years. However, it's not as hard for us to see Saul as irrational. And so perhaps that's why such an extensive account of his life and reign have been preserved for us in the scripture. It is so we can know what signs to look for and how to prepare when we see that evil behavior all around us. Remember, this is a behavior. Many believe, according to these patterns discussed today, that it seems possible that the so-called false prophet, the main henchman of the coming anti-Messiah, will be of Edomite descent, just like both Doug and Herod were. That's what a lot of people are seriously saying out there. Oh, we're looking for an Edomite who's going to rise up in the government. He's got to be an Edomite. Edomite, that's the pattern. Oh, maybe. But that seems a bit simple and lineage-like for me. I'd much prefer to just look at the common behavior of them all. Saul, Herod, Satan. Look at the common behavior of them all and see that there's only two languages, truth and lies. And Satan operates in the latter, right up close and personal inside people's minds. Let's strive not to have that usurping, cruel, self-seeking, self-ruling, glory-hounding, argumentative behavior inside us. Yeah? That's what I'm getting out of this whole irrationality. Saul's irrational, Herod's irrational, Satan's irrational. How can they honestly think they can win over Yahusha? Well, they do. They do. They believe that. They're going to take as many people with them. So if we understand that irrational is just a complicated way of saying a lie, we can find much truth on the subject and run to the same place David did, Yahusha. So knowing that it means a lie, irrational means a lie, let's see what Yahusha said about it. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you wish to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and has not stood in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks the lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. The language of lies. And in 2 Thessalonians 2, the appearing of the lawless one is by means of the working of Satan with all power and signs and wonders of falsehood, and with all deceit of disobedience in those perishing, because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be delivered. And for this reason, Yahuwah sends them a working of delusion, for them to believe the falsehood. That's another word of saying a lie. Believe the lie. Believe the fraud. Believe the impostor. In order that all should be judged who did not believe the truth, but have delighted in lawlessness. See here when it says the impostor, people always want to put a face on it. It's Constantine, he changed the Torah, he abolished the true Shabbat, it's Constantine. No, it's Jesus, he's the impostor, he's the one walking around, people worshipping as himself. Maybe, but that's putting a face on it. It's a spirit, it's Satan. If you can put a face on it and declare that you're not that, you can still do lots of other things. It's a behavior that you've got to come out of. Irrational thinking. It's a behavior. Situation comes up, you get thoughts. Where do you get the thoughts from? It creates an emotion within you, and then you behave that emotion. And this is what you end up with, like Saul. He was completely nuts and irrational. Listening to the language of Satan's lies, not only promoted through the world systems, philosophies and religions, but also in our own ears, listening to that will render us irrational, emotional, crazy talkers with erratic loop-de-loop behavior, void of the inbuilt sanity and rational thought that Torah brings as it washes our minds clean. Yahusha is the only voice of reason in this world. So the summation is truth or lies. You can go down a whole rabbit's hole on Google and everywhere of irrational thought, and all the psychologists have things to say about it. Irrational thought and irrational and all these types of, and then there's the science side of it. Rational, irrational numbers and rational. There's all this stuff to do with the rational. Let's just summarize into this. You're going to listen to the truth or listen to lies. Lies will make you crazy. You turn into a mad person. Truth will bring you to sobriety and keep you there. If you're not afraid to speak it, not afraid to hear it, not afraid to live in it, not afraid to confess it if it comes up. That's where we have to live, in the truth, guys. So that's enough tongue talking today. See you later.